Okay, this is a recap of verb conjugation in the present tense. So, we have seen lots of these verbs in class in our chapter recently. Verbs like bailar, leer, escribir. All of these right here are verbs, the part of speech they are. And I have them laid out in three different types. We have verbs here that end in AR. All of these end in AR. Verbs that end in ER, and verbs that end in IR. You'll hear me in class mention AR verbs or ER verbs or IR verbs. That's what I mean by that, the ending that we're dealing with. Some other things that you've probably heard me throw around a good bit is this word right here, an infinitive. An infinitive is the most basic form of a verb. It tells us the meaning of the verb, but it doesn't give us the subject or the tense. For example, here I have hablar. Hablar means to speak. Now, it doesn't tell us who is doing the speaking. It doesn't tell us when they were speaking. It simply gives us the action, to speak. If you're having trouble recognizing which verbs are infinitives, they're always going to end with either AR, ER, or IR. So if you see that on the end of the verb, you can recognize that as the infinitive. Another word that you probably haven't heard outside of a language classroom is conjugate. Conjugate is a big fancy word. Basically, it simply means change. When we conjugate a verb, we change it, and we change it in a specific way in order to suit a certain subject in a certain tense. How we change it will depend on what we'd like to say. We do this in English as well. This verb right here, to speak. This is simply giving us the action. We don't know who is speaking. In order to give us a subject, we need to change the verb. So right here, I have the subject she. She speaks. Note that we had to add an S onto the end. Speak needed to change to speaks in order to suit the she. It doesn't make sense in English to say, she speak. We have to say she speaks. The change is even more extreme here when we put it in they and the past tense. Speak is significantly different than spoke. So that's an example of how we would change verbs in English. The last term that you've probably heard in class is a verb stem. The stem of a verb is the infinitive minus its AR, ER, or IR ending. So for example, if I have nadar here, to swim, and I chop off the AR, I'm left with just nad, right? N-A-D. That is what we would call the verb stem. Comer, chop off the ER, C-O-M. That is the verb stem. Escribir, chopped off the IR, and we're left with escribe, the verb stem. Now, you should know that this nad, com, escribib, these are not actual words in Spanish. They have no meaning. They are simply tools for us to use while we are conjugating, while we're changing our verbs. Very good. So let's get right into it. Conjugating an AR verb in the present tense. Now, we're going to start with just AR verbs. However, you should know that the process for conjugation is very similar between AR, ER, and IR verbs. So this is what we do. We start with the infinitive form. The second step here is to chop off the AR, and then we'll be left with simply the verb stem. And then we add an ending, an appropriate ending, onto the verb stem. Now, what the appropriate ending is going to depend on what the subject is. But the endings for AR verbs are these: o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. These 6 verb endings correspond to the 6 pronouns that we went over at the beginning of the year. Yo, which is I, tu, which is the informal you, él, ella, usted, which is he, she, and the formal you, nosotros, we, vosotros, y'all, ellos, ellas, both mean they, and ustedes, you all. These endings correspond with the box of the pronouns. So if we're going to speak in the yo form, if you want to say that I do something, we would always use the O ending. Okay, we're not going to use the on ending. That would be for ellos. So in actual conjugation here, I have nadar, which means to swim. But if I want to say I swim, I need to conjugate nadar for the subject, which is I, which would be the yo form. So I start with nadar. I chop off my AR and I'm left with the verb stem. And then I add the appropriate ending. The appropriate ending in this case would be O. And so yo nado, to swim, becomes I swim. You can follow this process all through the chart. We take nadar, and if we wish to say you, the familiar you, swim, we start with nadar, we chop off the AR and we're left with the verb stem, and then we add the appropriate ending, the to ending on, which is us. So, to nadas. We can do that for each of these forms. So, él nada, nosotros nadamos, vosotros nadáis, and then ellos nadan. All we're doing here is chopping off the ending and adding the appropriate AR ending onto the verb. Another example for you here, cantar, to sing. I could say yo canto, I sing. Tú cantas, you sing. Él, ella, usted canta, he, she, or you formal sing. Nosotros cantamos, we sing. Vosotros cantáis, y'all sing. Ellos, ellas cantan, they sing, or ustedes, this is the abbreviation for ustedes, cantan. Once again, hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan. Same deal here. I talk, you talk, he, she talks, we talk, y'all talk, they talk. Very good. ER verbs such as comer, to eat, leer, to read, and oh, there's comer again. Well, comer twice. The process is the exact same. However, we do have a set of endings which are specific to ER verbs. So here I have o, es, e, hemos, es, and en. So quite different than AR verb endings. However, we're going to use them in the same way. If I don't want to say to eat, but I eat, I start with comer, I chop off that AR, and then I add the appropriate endings onto the verb stem. So I eat would be yo como. You eat, tú comes. He eats, él come. Nosotros comemos, we eat. Vosotros coméis, y'all eat. Ellas, ellos, ustedes comen, they eat, or you all eat. IR verbs, this is the same pattern. We are still starting with the infinitive, chopping off the IR ending, and this time we're going to add the endings for IR verbs. Now this one's quite easy because the ending for IR verbs are very, very similar to the endings for ER verbs. O, es, e, which is exactly the same. Imos, is, en. So the only change we have between IR and ER endings is this right here, imos and is. An example here for you, we have escribir, to write. If I wanted to say I write, I would chop off my IR and add an O onto the end. Yo escribo rather than escribir. I write. Tú escribes, you write. Él, ella, usted escribe. He, she, you write. Nosotros escribimos, we write. Vosotros escribís, y'all write. Ellos, ellas escriben, they write, or ustedes escriben, you all write. And that is conjugating AR, ER, IR verbs in the present tense.